Have you ever noticed how some places just seem to have stories, like practically oozing out of the walls?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, today we're diving into one of those places, one that's steeped in history and maybe even a little bit spooky.
Sounds intriguing.
We're heading to the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana.
Ah, the Myrtles Plantation. I've heard of it, of course. Isn't it the one that's supposed to be haunted?
That's the one. But there's a lot more to it than just ghost stories. It's this beautiful historic home built all the way back in 1796 by General David Bradford.
A Revolutionary War general, right?
That's right. And the house has seen a lot in the centuries since then. We're talking architectural transformations, family dramas, even whispers of scandal. And we're going straight to the source for this one.
Ooh. Let me guess, we've got some dusty old diaries to pour over.
Not quite diaries, but close.
Yeah.
We're diving into the National Register of Historic Places documentation for the Myrtles Plantation.
Ah, the official record. Always a good place to start.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to break down this document, pull out the most interesting parts, and see what we can learn about the Myrtles, from its very beginnings to its, well, let's just say its more colorful reputation.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's go back to 1796. General David Bradford builds this place, originally calls it Laurel Grove. What can you tell us about those early days?
Well, Bradford, as you mentioned, was a general in the Revolutionary War, but he was also known for his role in the Whiskey Rebellion.
The Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah, a bit of a tax revolt situation. Anyway, after the war, he ends up building Laurel Grove on a pretty sizable chunk of land, something like 600 acres.
600 acres. Wow.
Yeah, a real statement. But here's the interesting thing. He lived there all alone for a few years.
By himself. On 600 acres. Why's that?
It wasn't until he received a pardon in 1799 for his involvement in that rebellion we talked about that his wife, Elizabeth, and their 5 children finally joined him from Pennsylvania.
Ah, so it was a bit of a delayed family reunion. So Bradford passes away in 1808. What happens to Laurel Grove then?
Well, Elizabeth, his widow, she's not one to just sit back. She took the reins and managed the plantation for almost 10 years, up until 1817.
Impressive.
It was then that the management passed over to Clark Woodruff. He had been a law student under Bradford and eventually married his daughter, Sarah Matilda.
So staying within the family then.
You got it. A lot of these early Southern families, they were all interconnected in some way.
I see. And what about the Woodruffs? How was their time at the plantation?
They had 3 children, but sadly the 1820s were not kind to them. Sarah Matilda and 2 of their kids died from yellow fever.
Oh, how awful.
Yeah, it was a common scourge back then. Elizabeth Bradford herself passed away in 1831, and eventually Clark Woodruff decided to sell the plantation in 1834. It was bought by a man named Ruffin Gray Sterling.
Sterling, now that name rings a bell. It's connected to how we know the plantation today, right?
Exactly. Ruffin Gray Sterling and his wife, Mary Catherine Cobb, they really put their stamp on the place. They did a major remodel, almost doubled the size of the house. And it was under their watch that the name changed from Laurel Grove to the Myrtles.
Because of the crepe myrtles on the property.
That's the story.
I love those trees.
They are pretty stunning.
So the Myrtles as we know it today is really a result of the Sterling's vision. What happens after Ruffin Sterling dies in 1854?
His wife, Mary Catherine Cobb, inherits the plantation. Then things get really interesting because, the Civil War breaks out.
Ah, right. Everything changes after that.
In 1865, Mary Catherine hires William Drew Winter as her manager. He was also a lawyer, by the way.
So he's wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah, a real multitasker. And to keep things in the family, so to speak, he ends up marrying Sterling's daughter, Sarah.
So we've got another intertwined family here.
You can really see how the Myrtles and the family who lived there were, woven together.
Fascinating. So the Winter family becomes a big part of the Myrtles' history then.
They do. They had 6 children of their own. But like a lot of families in the South at that time, they were hit hard by the war.
Economically, you mean?
Yeah. Most of their wealth was tied up in Confederate currency, which of course became worthless after the war.
Right.
And it was so sad, they had to sell the plantation in 1868.
Just a few years after the war ended.
But the story doesn't end there. They managed to buy it back in 1870.
Oh, so they returned to the Myrtles. That's good, at least.
It was a short-lived return, though. In 1871, William Winter was killed right on the porch of the house.
Killed? What happened?
The details are a little fuzzy. The record mentions some sort of altercation with a man named E.S. Weber.
Oh my gosh. So what happened to Sarah and the children?
Sarah stayed at the Myrtles with her mother and siblings. Sadly, she passed away just a few years later in 1878.
And her mother.
Mary Catherine died in 1880. Her son Stephen inherited the Myrtles but was deep in debt and was forced to sell in 1886. It seems like the late 19th century was a tumultuous period for the plantation.
It sounds like it. So many changes in ownership.
Definitely. It wasn't until 1891 that Harris and Milton Williams bought it. Then in the 20th century, the land around the house was divided up among his heirs, and the house itself was sold a few more times before it was finally bought by James and Frances Cremeen Myers.
And they are the ones who turned it into a bed and breakfast.
You got it. And today, the Myrtles is owned by John and Tita Moss.
Quite a journey from 1796 to the present day.
It really is a testament to how places can endure, even through so much change.
Absolutely. Okay, we've heard about all the different families who called the Myrtles home. Now let's talk about the house itself. The architecture. As you mentioned, there were some big renovations over the years. What did the original 1796 Creole cottage look like?
Okay, so picture this. A classic Creole cottage facing east. It was made of wood with clapboard siding and had 6 bays.
Bays.
Openings, like windows and doors along the front of the house. And it had 3 dormers poking out from the roof.
Okay, I'm picturing it. It sounds very charming.
And then the Sterlings came along in the 1850s and really shook things up. They extended the house to the south, basically doubled the size.
That's a pretty major renovation.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And they added a new grand entrance with double doors. And get this, the doors had original hand-painted stained glass.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And the design, it's like a French cross, supposedly for protection, warding off evil spirits and such.
I love that detail. It's like a little window into their beliefs back then.
Right. And they added this incredible veranda, the one you see in all the pictures. It runs the entire length of the front of the house, 125 feet long, and wraps around the south end.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of that. It's beautiful, all those intricate details.
It's made of cast iron with this delicate grape cluster motif. Very elegant.
And what about the roof? Did they change that too?
They did. The original house had 3 dormers, remember? Well, they added 2 more, bigger ones, with double panes of glass and these little triangular pediments on top.
To match the originals.
Yeah, they were trying to keep that architectural harmony,
It makes sense.
And then they sprinkled in 3 more single-pane dormers for good measure. So now you've got this really interesting roof line with 6 dormers and 6 brick chimneys.
It must be quite a sight.
It really is. And then on the back of the house, the side that faces west, they added a loggia.
A loggia? What's that?
It's like a covered porch, open on one side. And on that side of the house, they added 5 more dormers, similar to the ones in front. So the whole house has this sense of balance and symmetry.
Okay, now I really want to see this place in person.
We should. It's worth a visit.
Absolutely. So let's step inside. I know you mentioned that the house has 22 rooms spread over 2 floors.
It does. And let me tell you, the entry hall is just breathtaking. It stretches the entire length of the house.
It's a long hallway.
It is. And it's got all this faux bois molding, where they make wood look like stone.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that in old houses.
And then there's this incredible frieze, all delicate and pierced. And the centerpiece is this massive French crystal chandelier.
How massive are we talking?
Over 300 pounds.
That must be a sight to see.
It really is. And the best part is that they've preserved the original flooring and most of the windows. So when you walk in, it's like stepping back in time.
I love that. It's like you're really experiencing history firsthand.
Exactly.
Now, what about the other rooms on the first floor? What are some of the highlights?
Okay, so to the left of the entry hall is the music room. And right next to that is the only bedroom on the ground floor.
Ah, so it was designed for someone who maybe couldn't climb the stairs easily.
Could be. And then to the right, they took the original rooms and made them into 4 really grand spaces. 2 parlors, one for the ladies and one for the gentlemen, a formal dining room, and a game room.
Wow, it sounds so elegant. Perfect for plantation life back then, I imagine.
Absolutely. They love to entertain. And the details in these rooms are just exquisite. In the 2 parlors, they have these gorgeous Carrara marble fireplaces in the Rococo Revival style.
Rococo Revival, that sounds fancy.
It was all the rage back then. Very ornate, lots of curves and flourishes. And then up above, there are these elaborate plaster cornices and ceiling medallions.
So they really went all out with the decorations.
They did. And here's a fun fact. Those plaster decorations, they were made from clay, Spanish moss, and cattle hair.
Cattle hair.
Yeah. Apparently, it helped to bind the plaster together. And get this, No two of them are exactly alike.
It's amazing how they used whatever materials they had on hand back then.
It really is. And the craftsmanship is just stunning.
Hmm.
Okay, now let's head upstairs. There are 5 bedrooms up there, each with its own bathroom.
Having your own bathroom in a house that old is a luxury, I'd say.
Oh yeah, definitely a later addition. The biggest bedroom is called the Judge Clark Woodruff Suite. That's the only one you can get to directly from the main staircase in the entry hall.
So the best room in the house.
You could say that. And then the other 4 bedrooms, you have to take a different staircase to get to them.
Yeah.
It's a staircase that goes up from the loggia we talked about earlier.
Okay, so there's a kind of a separate wing to the upstairs.
Yeah. And here's another interesting detail. When they built that addition, the ceilings were higher than in the original part of the house. So they actually raised the floor level of those 4 bedrooms by a foot.
So there's a little step up.
Yep. It's like the house is telling the story of its own evolution.
I love that. So we've seen the inside of the Myrtles. Now let's explore the grounds. What's out there?
Well, the landscape is really beautiful, all centered around this big pond. And in the middle of the pond, there's a gazebo on a little island.
Oh, charming.
Right. And behind the main house, you'll find the oldest structure on the entire property. It's called the General Store, and that's actually where David Bradford lived while they were building the main house.
Wow, so it's like stepping back to the very beginning.
It is. And now it's a gift shop, a laundry, offices, and a breakfast spot for guests.
They've really made good use of it.
They have. And then there's another building south of the main house that's now a restaurant.
So there are a few places to grab a bite to eat.
There are. And all of these buildings are connected by this big old brick courtyard, about 5,000 square feet.
Wow, that sounds like a whole little village back there.
Kind of, yeah. And then scattered around the grounds, they have these modern wooden cottages for guests who want to stay overnight.
Nice. So you can experience the history of the Myrtles and still have all the modern comforts.
Exactly.
Now, I know there was a fire on the property a few years back. What happened there?
Yes, in 2014, there was a fire in an extension they had built onto the general store.
Oh no, was the original structure damaged?
Luckily, the worst of the damage was contained to the newer part. The original structure was mostly fine, and the main house was unharmed.
Thank goodness. I'd hate to think of something happening to such a historic place.
Me too. It was a close call, but the heart of the Myrtles was saved.
Okay, so we've talked about the history, the architecture, the families who live there, but let's be honest, the Myrtles is famous for something else too.
You mean the ghosts?
That's the one. We can't really talk about the Myrtles without mentioning its, shall we say, more mysterious side.
True. There's a lot of talk about the Myrtles being haunted, and some people even say it's built on an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground.
Oh, wow. Adding another layer to the story.
Right. And then there's the legend of William Winter's death. The story goes that he was shot and managed to make it back inside the house, but died on the 17th step of the main staircase.
On the 17th step.
Yeah. It's a pretty dramatic image, right? And it's become a big part of the Myrtles lore.
It's not surprising that a place with such a long and sometimes tragic history would have ghost stories attached to it.
I agree. I mean, think about it. All those families, all those lives lived and lost within those walls.
It's bound to leave some kind of energy behind.
And the Myrtles has really embraced its haunted reputation. It's been featured on all sorts of TV shows about the paranormal, unsolved mysteries, ghost hunters, you name it.
I think I even saw it on a Netflix show recently.
It was. They even offer special ghost tours for visitors.
So they've turned it into a bit of a tourist attraction.
Definitely. You can take a historical tour if you're more interested in the facts, or you can go on the mystery tour and delve into all the ghost stories.
Smart marketing.
I know, right?
Well, it's been fascinating to learn so much about the Myrtles Plantation, from its official history to its more legendary side.
It really is a fascinating place, a real blend of history and mystery.
It makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden within those walls.
Right. What would those walls say if they could talk?
Exactly. It's a reminder that places have stories to tell, and it's up to us to listen. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if you're ever in Louisiana, maybe take a trip to St. Francisville and see the Myrtles Plantation for yourself. You might just feel a chill down your spine.
Or maybe get a glimpse of something you can't quite explain.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those stories alive.